The eldest princess is going to marry the man I like. I was so angry that I wanted to break up with her. The princess pinched my chin and said angrily, I have loved and pampered you for 10 years, but you are not as good as that wild man Yuan outside. You really broke my heart. I said without thinking. If you were a man, I would not love anyone else and would marry you. The princess smiled at that moment and grabbed my hand to touch her. 01. I was happily listening to some music in a restaurant when my mother sent someone to urgently call me back. On the way, I was thinking about what I had done wrong recently, but unexpectedly my mother said that she had a dream last night. In the dream, 3 years later, my whole family met with a bad ending, and I was the only one who entered the palace and became a royal concubine. The whole family looked at me in unison, with a hint of suspicion in their eyes. The eldest and second brothers said in unison, You must be a seller seeking glory. I got anxious on the spot. What is there in our family that is worth selling? Our father is just a sixth-rank official who takes a small salary and works for a few days and rests for 2 days. His biggest hobby is to hide his private money in the rice jar. My eldest brother is not good at literature or martial arts, but he dreams of becoming a knight-errant all day long. He just spent 50 taels to secretly forge a sword. What about my second brother? He has banned books hidden in his bed. What is there to sell in this family? When my father and my older brothers heard me roaring, their faces went blank for a moment. The next moment, the room was filled with wailing. Well, you still dare to hide your private money. Boss, take out your sword that's worth 50 taels so I can see if it's inlaid with gems or melted with gold. Someone, lift up the second young master's bed and take out everything inside. My mother was so furious that she picked up a feather duster and beat them until they screamed. I immediately felt relieved, and I poured tea for my mother like a dog. Mom, don't be angry. I am still your sweet little cotton-padded jacket. Drink some tea to moisten your throat, and think about how we will deal with the crisis of extermination of the whole family 3 years later. My mother glared at the 3 men kneeling on the washboard, thought for a moment, and said, I only remember this tragic incident. I don't remember anything else. The second brother muttered, Mom, you must be having a nightmare. How could we be involved in a tragedy that wiped out our entire family? Besides, look at my little sister, who is idle all day long. How could she possibly enter the palace and become a favorite concubine? What's wrong with your little sister? My mother gave him another feather duster. She is smart, cute, and kind, but she is a little naughty. I felt guilty after hearing this and didn't dare to respond. My father stood up and massaged my mother's shoulders. Madam, in my opinion, running away is the best strategy. I will resign from my post. You sell the shop, and we will return to our hometown to avoid disaster. My mother thought about it and felt that it was feasible, but she said with embarrassment, But I'm afraid it will be difficult to explain to the eldest princess. 10 years ago, I was a little girl playing in the mud in the countryside. My father was only an 8th-rank county official, and my mother ran a few shops. Life was going on peacefully until one day several horse-drawn carriages came in a hurry. It was said that the princess in the capital had contracted a strange disease, and the Imperial Astronomical Observatory calculated that I could exorcise the evil spirit and cure the disease for the princess. From that day on, our family moved to Beijing. I stayed with the princess, and her illness gradually got better. I originally thought I would be able to return home soon, but I didn't expect that the princess would become weak and short of breath if I left her for more than 3 days. The emperor issued an edict, appointing my father to an idle official position, and we settled down in the capital. Just as I was thinking about it, someone from the princess's mansion came to ask me to go back. My mother stroked my hair gently and whispered, You've only been here for 2 days, and you're leaving again. My mother's tone sounded a little sad. But on weekdays, she just wants me to get out of here as she thinks I'm causing trouble at home. I don't know what else happened in my mother's dream. Miss, it's time to go. The princess has a headache and has been waiting for you for a long time. The people outside are urging us again. 02. After entering the princess's mansion, I saw the princess playing chess in the pavilion or waterside terrace from afar. The emperor has only one legitimate daughter, the princess, and he dotes on her like a pearl and jade. Alas, there is only one thing that makes people sigh. The eldest princess is now 22 years old and has no desire to get married. As I got closer, I saw that she had a beautiful face, with a graceful figure and an elegant appearance, as if all the glory in the world was gathered on her. Everyone says that when seeing Her Royal Highness the Princess, jewels lose their luster and stars dim, and this is not an exaggeration at all. It's just the beginning of spring. Why don't you stay here and enjoy the breeze? I took the maid's cloak and put it on her. She glanced at me, her eyes turned cold, and she smashed the white jade chess piece in her hand down fiercely. The people around him knelt down one after another, not daring to breathe. Alas, Huayong has always had a bad temper. Since I started accompanying her when she was 8 years old, she has never had a happy day. But I'm not afraid of her. I leaned beside her, took her cool hand and warmed it in my arms, coaxing her and saying, "I could have stayed with my parents for another day, but I heard that you had a headache, so I rushed back without even having time to change my clothes." Huayong's expression softened a bit. When he saw the men's clothes on me, he immediately raised his eyebrows and sneered, "That pipa-playing girl in Baiwelu is so popular with you that you go to support her whenever you have time. Qingmyang is alone and helpless. I support her from time to time and save her a lot of trouble." I secretly glanced at Huayong's expression, and my tone became softer and softer, and I said coquettishly, "Am I not relying on the princess's love for me to bully others?" Huayong pushed me away with disdain. "Go wash up, change these ugly clothes, and dress up properly. I have a banquet at Chuana Garden, I'll take you with me." I was stunned. If we go there now, won't the guests have to wait too long? Even if I let them wait until night, no one would dare to say a word to me. Huayong didn't care. He pinched my cheek and said unhappily, "I sent someone to pick you up last night, but you refused to come back. You delayed today's banquet, and they should wait for you. Yuan, you should know that you disobeyed me, so someone has to bear my anger for you." My face fell, and I went to change clothes with the maid in a depressed manner. Huayong naturally treats me very well. There are rare treasures all over the world, and there is nothing I cannot get if I want it. My parents often said privately that Huayong spoiled me so much, and I didn't grow up to be a bad person, which was a blessing from God. But since I am always with Huayong, there are some things I cannot tell my parents. Huayong's doting on me sometimes makes me feel suffocated. When I first came to Beijing, I was only 8 years old and very ignorant. When she attended a banquet, she was mocked by the noble ladies in the capital, saying that she was a country girl who did not know etiquette. My parents taught me to be well-educated, but they also let me play outside. I was not very good at etiquette, but not to the point of being embarrassed. That day at the banquet, the girl made sarcastic remarks about my parents, and I was so angry. Huayong came over, took my hand, and kicked over the table in front of the man. The girl's father was also a third-rank official, but Huayong let the maid hold her down and slap her in the face until her mouth was full of blood. Later I heard that the girl was sent out of the capital and raised in a farm in the countryside. From today on, you will treat Yuan as you treat me. If I ever find out who dares to be disrespectful to her, I will make her regret coming into this world. Huayong held me tightly. Everyone prostrated themselves on the ground, terrified by Huayong's power. From that day on, I was branded with Huayong's mark. "Young lady, why do you always disobey the princess?" The maid helped me dress up and gently advised me, "If you make the princess unhappy, no one will have a good life." I fiddled with the red hairpin in my hand, but was thinking about other things. My mother said that the whole family would suffer in 3 years, but I became a royal concubine. The emperor is older than my father, yet he wants me to enter the palace and be his concubine. Alas, if she became Huayong's stepmother, she would be so angry that she would die. I looked at myself in the mirror. I had beautiful features, bright eyes, and a pretty face, but I wasn't that pretty. I can't leave in a short time. If I get married first, can I escape this disaster? Huayong came in, looked at me, changed a pair of South Pearl earrings for me, and then took me out. I just said a few words to you, and you gave me a cold look. If you don't know better, you would think you are a princess. In the carriage, Huayong peeled a round grape and fed it to me. I glared at her and bit her finger on purpose. Huayong was probably angry, and he looked at me with eyes as if they were burning with fire. I got scared and obediently opened my mouth and swallowed a grape. Huayong lowered his head and wiped his fingers slowly, ignoring me. When I arrived at Chuanhe Garden, I realized that this spring viewing banquet was actually held to select a prince consort for Huayong. The emperor has issued an imperial decree, and the princess cannot escape at this time. No wonder she has been in a bad mood all the way. After the banquet started, everyone started to have fun. I quietly called Xie Qingyang out. We grew up together, and Xie Qingyang treated me very well and almost always responded to my requests. He looked at me gently, tapped my forehead, and said with a smile, "Why are you asking me to do something sneaky? Did the princess bully you again? If you pull her sleeve and coax her a few words, her anger will subside." I looked at his warm face and smiled brightly. "I like you." Xie Qingyang's expression was as if he had seen a ghost. He took several steps back. I hurried over to explain to him. I didn't know that Yuan actually liked a man like Xie Qingyang. The eldest princess's cold voice came from behind me, and my whole body froze. When I turned around, I saw the eldest princess and a group of attendants standing behind me, looking at me coldly. The eldest princess came over, stroked my hair, and smiled. "Since a Yuan likes it, then I will appoint Xie Qingyang as the prince consort. From now on, he will live in the princess's mansion every day, and you will be able to see him every day." "Yuan, are you happy?" "Princess, do I look happy to you?" I glanced at Xie Qingyang from the corner of my eye. He looked like a man who had lost his parents. 03. Huayong is going to marry Xie Qingyang. This news has spread throughout the capital. The emperor was overjoyed and quickly set a date for their wedding. Marrying a princess is not such an easy thing. You will never have the chance to pursue a career in politics in your life. Xie Qingyang, a person like the clear breeze and bright moon, was ruined by me like this, and I feel very sad. But the princess has spoken her mind, and the emperor has issued an edict granting the marriage, so there is no room for maneuver. I was drawing a little man in the study in a distracted state. When I looked up and saw Huayong coming in, I immediately wanted to destroy the painting. Who knew that Huayong was so quick and quickly took the painting away? She picked up the painting and looked at it for a long time. Huayong looked up at me, and his usually fierce expression was surprisingly gentle. My face turned red, and I couldn't utter a word. It's because there are two little people in the painting, one is me and the other is Huayong. We were holding hands affectionately, and wearing red clothes. I don't know what's going on recently. The princess's mansion is busily preparing for Huayong's wedding. My mother sent me a message saying that it was a good time to escape. After the princess got married, I found an excuse to go back to my hometown with them to avoid the disaster that would happen 3 years later. The servants in the mansion were all happy, talking about how Huayong and Xie Qingyang would live in harmony in the future when they got a prince consort. Yes, now that Huayong has a prince consort, I have become an outsider, a superfluous person. I can't sleep with her every day, and she can't always play with me. I left home when I was 8 years old and lived with Huayong. To me, she is more of a friend than a relative. I caught a cold and refused to take medicine, so Huayong took the bitter medicine himself to appease me. I felt wronged, and Huayong was even angrier than I was. I just said that I missed the lotus pond in my hometown, and she had someone build a yard specifically for planting flowers in the lake. I didn't like staying at home, so she took me out to travel. It has been 10 years. I thought I would be happy to leave Huayong, but I didn't expect that I would feel so sad. Your eyes are red for no reason. Huayong sat down, grabbed my hand, and led me over. I leaned against her legs and cried uncontrollably. Huayong raised his hand to wipe my tears and whispered, "If you don't like me, I won't marry you." I immediately shook my head. No matter how much the emperor doted on Huayong, he would never let her be so willful. The Xie family is an aristocratic family. If Huayong breaks off the engagement at this critical moment, where will the Xie family save their face? It's neither right to marry nor not to marry. What do you say? Huayong leaned back in the chair, supporting her chin and looking at me leisurely. She chuckled. Yuan, are you so reluctant to let me go? I met her teasing eyes, pulled up her sleeve and wiped my face, and said in a dull voice, most men in the world are heartless, have 3 wives and 4 concubines, and are unreliable. Although Xie Qingyang is chaste, he doesn't like you. Now he has to marry you because of your power. After a long time, you might become a couple of enemies. I am afraid that Huayong, who is so high and dazzling, will be worn out in marriage, lose his brilliance, and suffer for the rest of his life. Over the years, I have been hanging out in the capital wearing men's clothes, hearing many stories and seeing many romantic things. The sweetheart whom I begged to marry home turned into an eyesore in just a few years. He kept saying that he was willing to share the good and bad times with his wife, but after making money, he turned around and abandoned her. Men are all bad. I wish I were a man. I pinched Huayong's sleeve, looked at her sadly, and said, I love you so much. If I married you, I would definitely coax you and pamper you every day and never let you suffer any grievances. Huayong met my gaze and slowly sat up straight. She stared at me and asked word by word, Yuan, do you know what you were saying? If I were a man, I would marry you. I vowed I would hold you in my hands, in my heart, and love you forever without any second thoughts. Well, the thing is, I'm not a man. Forget it. I'll keep an eye on Xie Qingyang for Huayong. Huayong is so good. Maybe after they get married, Xie Qingyang will fall in love with her. Thinking of this, I feel a little better. I was still distracted, thinking about how to help Huayong in the future, but Huayong grabbed my wrist and pulled me into his arms. What, I opened my eyes wide. My heart was pounding, and all the blood in my body was rushing to my face. A pair of hands covered my eyes, and I could only smell the fresh scent of Huayong. 04. Whenever I think of what happened in the study that day, I feel like I've been struck by lightning. Huayong actually likes me, like a man likes a woman. She stroked my slightly swollen lips and said with an ambiguous look in her eyes, Yuan, I know you are upset and confused right now. I'll give you some time to think about it carefully. What I think? What do I think? What do I think? I ran back home overnight, stayed inside the house, and pretended to be dead. My mother indulged me for the first 2 days, but on the 3rd day, she kicked the door open and pulled me out of bed. Why are you on a hunger strike? My mother lifted the quilt. She was furious at first, but when she saw the pastry crumbs around my mouth, she became speechless again. She wiped the corners of my mouth carelessly and said angrily, Yuan, you are so stupid. How will you get married in the future? A while ago, you were praising me for being kind, intelligent, and lovely, but in the blink of an eye, I have become stupid and dull. It can be seen that this maternal love does not last long. My mother washed and combed my hair, then suddenly sighed. You were weak when you were born. Your father and I were always worried that we couldn't take care of you, so we prayed to the gods day and night, not asking for you to be outstanding in talent or appearance, but only asking for you to grow up safely and healthily. Who knew that I would spoil you like a wild boy, following your 2 brothers all day, either catching pheasants in the mountains or fishing in the rivers. When the eldest princess brought you to the capital, Mother didn't sleep well for a single night. Day after day, I wondered how my lively little daughter could survive in the capital with so many nobles and so many rules. As she spoke, her eyes became red. I turned around and hugged her waist, pressed against her body, and coveted her scent. Mom, we will be fine. Dad has resigned from his official position, and the family shop has also been sold. There are only a few small things left to pack. At night, we will quietly leave the capital and never come back. Have you said goodbye to the princess? You hurried home that day without saying a word. Did you get angry with the princess? My mother poked my forehead. The princess has been very kind to you in the past 10 years. You should remember this kindness. Speaking of the eldest princess, My face became hot again. I hesitated for a moment and said, "Mother, tell me, if one day a girl you particularly value, love, and are close to confesses her feelings to you, how would you feel?" My mother looked at me with a carefree look that almost made me explode with anger. Then she slowly said, "No one can explain the matter of love clearly. Whether you are a man or a woman or a man or a woman, it is most important to remove the worldly appearance and ask your own heart. Okay, pack your luggage. Don't go out and find out that you forgot to bring something." My mother rubbed my face and suddenly disdained me. "When you go back to the countryside, you won't have those servants in the princess's mansion to serve you. If you keep losing things all day long, you'll be served by feather dusters. At night, we can finally leave the capital." I looked in the direction of the princess's mansion and said goodbye to Huayang softly in my heart. She is the eldest princess and is about to marry Xie. She must not allow any messy news to spread at this time. Huayang has always had strategies in her mind. She often goes to the palace to give advice to the emperor, and court officials praise her highly. Huayang will definitely become a princess whose name goes down in history. She is capable and ambitious. "Huayang, you shouldn't and can't have anything to do with me, otherwise the gossip of others will ruin her." Once we got on the carriage, my mother saw that I was feeling down and just hugged me. The carriage stopped suddenly, which scared me. "Lord Wen, why are you traveling so fast in the middle of the night with your wife and daughter?" A slightly angry voice came from outside, and I knew it was Huayang. When they lifted the curtain, they saw an arrow stuck in the carriage. My father was so frightened that he was sweating coldly. Huayang sat on his horse, holding a bow and arrow, looked at me coldly and said, "Ayuan, come here." I refused and just looked at her. My mother handed me a letter, gave me a push, and said calmly, "Go and give this letter to the princess." I hesitated for a moment, but still listened to my mother. I walked over and raised my hand to hand the letter to Huayang. Huayang simply grabbed my hand, exerted great force, and brought me onto the carriage. "I've been waiting for you in agony day after day in the mansion, only to see this result." Huayang's face was miserable, and he said hatefully, "Yuan, you are going to betray me." I leaned against her cool armor, not wanting to say another word. Huayang opened the letter my mother gave him and glanced through it. My mother got off the carriage and said with tears in her eyes, "Your Highness, Yuan has been stupid and naughty since she was a child, and she has a stubborn personality. But she is kind at heart. I hope your Highness will protect her." Huayang got off his horse, bowed solemnly to my mother, and said softly, "I owed her a lot in the past. This opportunity to make amends is a gift from heaven. Madam, rest assured, I will not let her down." "Your Highness, I feel relieved with your words." My mother looked at me again and said meaningfully, "Your Highness will surely get what you wish for." Huayang smiled and said, "The Imperial Guards escorted Master Wen and his family out of the capital. My parents actually abandoned me like this." I was stunned, thinking that I might have been picked up. "Mother, have you forgotten that if I stayed in the capital, I would become the old emperor's concubine?" I was anxious and begged Huayang to let me go. "Huayang, I don't want to be your stepmother. I want to go back to my hometown with my parents. My father has so many beautiful women in his harem. How could he possibly be interested in a little girl like you?" Huayang wrapped me in a cloak and took me back home. 05. Huayang took me back to the princess's mansion, but she was so busy preparing for the wedding that she was nowhere to be seen every day. For 10 days, I couldn't even see a piece of her clothes, and she wouldn't let me leave the house. I thought of that ambiguous kiss again, and felt extremely annoyed when I thought about her upcoming marriage to Xie. What's going on? Are we three going to live together in the future? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I packed my bags in the middle of the night and planned to escape by climbing over the wall in the backyard. If what my mother said came true, I would have to go to the palace and marry that old emperor. It's scary to think about it. But as soon as I climbed the wall, the maid appeared and said gently, "Miss, the princess is waiting for you." I resigned myself to my fate and walked down the ladder, following her all the way back, only to find that this was the way to Hibiscus Pond. When I reached the door, the maid invited me in. I frowned. From childhood to adulthood, Huayong never wanted to take a bath with me. Even in the hot summer, she dressed warmly. Why is it so strange tonight? She actually asked me to meet her at Furong Pond. After entering, water vapor was rising. I walked over silently, picked up a soapberry nearby, and threw it at her back. You're planning to run again, Yuan. You really don't take my words to heart at all. A deep male voice came from me, and I stood up suddenly with fright. What's going on? Why is there a man's voice in Furong Pond?
Could it be that
Huayong is favoring men? My mind was confused, and my heart felt sad. Sure enough, she was just teasing me. I was about to leave when someone pulled me into the water. I was about to take action almost subconsciously, but he held my hands tightly. Madoka, it's me. I can see clearly the people who are close to me. It's actually Huayong, but it doesn't look like Huayong. It's clearly a man in front of me. He is more heroic than Huayong, and his appearance is still magnificent and gorgeous, yet not vulgar. I looked carefully and found that Huayong's red mole was still on his ear. Are you stunned? He held me in his arms and suddenly rested his forehead on my shoulder, laughing softly. I heard that you've been hiding in your room these few days, reading a book about a woman falling in love with another woman. Yuan, I am afraid that if I don't tell you the truth, you will really fall in love with a woman, and then I will regret it. I was struck by lightning. Huayong is actually a real man. In the flash of sparks, I remembered something. The late Crown Prince Zhou Songshi died in a sea of fire 10 years ago. In the same year, Princess Huayong fell seriously ill, and the Imperial Astronomical Observatory brought me to the capital to exorcise the evil spirit for the princess. I was so shocked that I trembled and said, Are you the late Crown Prince Zhou Songshi? Could it be that the person who died 10 years ago was the real Princess Huayong? He laughed again, and my heart was filled with joy. You're not that stupid. He rubbed my cheek affectionately and said, Be good, call my name twice again. I pursed my lips, unable to recover for a long time. I am such a fool that I have been wondering whether it is strange to fall in love with a woman. No wonder Huayong always wears extremely gorgeous makeup. It turns out that he is doing it to cover up his increasingly tough face. No wonder I sometimes felt that Huayong was sometimes tall and sometimes short. It turned out that he used the skill of shrinking his bones to cover up his tall stature. Yuan, dear, please call my name again. His eyes suppressed the shattered emotions, and he hugged me tightly, begging, In the past 10 years, I almost forgot who I was. My head hurts, Yuan. I was moved by his words and raised my hand to help him press the acupoints on his head. Zhou Songshi. I called the name softly, and the person was still the same person, just with a different gender and name. I couldn't recover from the shock for a long time and could only persuade myself to accept this matter slowly. 06. At night, he even dared to ask to sleep with me. I looked at him warily while holding the quilt and said firmly, It's okay that I didn't know your identity before, but there are differences between men and women. Your Highness, please stop teasing me. Zhou Songshi was wearing thin pajamas and standing barefoot on the cold floor. It was cold at night, he coughed a few times, and his face turned pale. Hey Yuan, are you disgusted with me? Zhou Songshi lowered his eyebrows, his voice sounding very sad. If you like me in women's clothes, then I will change back into women's clothes and be Huayong for the rest of my life. He stood on the ground for too long, and the cold air invaded his body, causing his cough to become more severe. I felt distressed when I heard this and hesitated to give up half of my bed. Seeing this, Zhou Songshi immediately lay down in the past, I always warmed his cold hands and feet, but now I just feel uncomfortable all over and dare not move except lying in bed. Yuan, you promised me your life. Are you going to regret it just because I'm a man? Zhou Songshi held my hand and said softly, You didn't push me away in the study that day, which shows that you have me in your heart. He dared to mention. I was so angry that I just said, I like women, not men. Unexpectedly, Zhou Songshi thought for a moment and said, Then I will castrate myself and pretend to be a woman for the rest of my life." He pretended to go out. I was so scared that I quickly grabbed him and said anxiously, "I love you no matter what you are like. I just can't bear that you lied to me for so long." Zhou Songshi immediately turned back, hugged me tightly, and kissed my cheek vigorously. I knew that Yuan would not have the heart to ignore me. I was so angry and annoyed by his kiss that I was entangled for so long. I was still thinking, we are both women, how can we be together? He is so good, just watching me worry about him in vain. Seeing that I was really angry, Zhou Songshi leaned close to my ear and whispered, "Yuan, I don't mean to lie to you, but there are some things that I cannot say at the right time. If they get out, many people will die. You've been unable to keep secrets since you were a child, and you are the closest to me, so I dare not tell you. So now, is the time right?" I was confused for a moment, then I shuddered and said in surprise, "You, Sho." Zhou Songshi pressed his lips against mine, preventing me from finishing my words. He held me in his arms and hid under the quilt, saying in a daze, "These 10 years seem like they were stolen. If you hadn't been by my side, I would have fallen into hell a long time ago." 10 years ago, the queen accused me of committing adultery in the palace and forced my father to execute me. When he said this, he held my hand very tightly. Huayang was already in poor health. She dragged her sick body, disguised herself as me, and died in the sea of fire. From that day on, I became Huayang. 07. The emperor got the throne by chance. The previous emperor died without leaving any offspring, so the emperor was pushed to the throne by his ministers. The former queen was originally a gentle, shy, and weak woman. After she entered the palace and became the queen, she was said to have worried too much and died of illness in less than 3 years. Later, the emperor made the general's daughter the current queen, and she gave birth to the second prince. 10 years ago, the former crown prince died in a fire, and the second prince was made crown prince soon after. I originally just listened to these things as a drama, but I didn't expect that the protagonist in them was actually right next to me. Before the age of 12, Zhou Song had a solitary character and was gifted by nature. Until now, there are still many people in the court comparing him with the prince. I remembered that Zhou Song had dressed up as Huayang over the years and behaved in a friendly and obedient manner in front of the queen. How painful it must have been for him to see his enemy enjoying wealth and glory and having to serve the queen with laughter. "A Yuan, my mother didn't die of illness." Zhou Songshi paused for a long time, his voice a little damp, and then he slowly said, "She hanged herself to give up the position of queen. She thought that if she compromised, she could save me and Huayang, but she was wrong. What they want is not only the position of queen, but also the position of crown prince, and even the whole world." I felt so sad that I hugged him tightly. The current emperor is a man of indecisiveness and weak temperament. In recent years, Zhou Songshi often went to the palace to assist in government affairs, which has caused dissatisfaction among many people. But they all thought Zhou Song was a woman, so although they objected, they didn't take it to heart. The queen came from a military family. Her father was General Li Zhongquan, who held military power. Over the years, Li Zhongquan eliminated dissidents and supported his own forces, and the court became the world of the Li family. Even the second prince, the crown prince, had to listen to his grandfather. If Zhou Songshi had not worked hard and used the emperor's protection to fight against the Li family, the world would have changed hands long ago. "I will accompany you from now on." I patted his back gently and coaxed him in a soft voice. "The people of the Imperial Observatory have long calculated that I am your lucky star, so I can exorcise evil spirits and cure your diseases. As long as I am with you from now on, all your suffering will pass." "Okay, Yuan, remember what you said. If you betray me in the future, I will." Zhou Songshi wanted to scare me with harsh words, but after a pause he said dejectedly, "Even if you betray me, I can't bear to kill you. So let me die miserably without a good end." "Don't talk nonsense," I hit him. Zhou Songshi leaned on my shoulder, rubbing his forehead against mine and said, "Yuan, dear, I got caught in the wind at night and have a severe headache. If you kiss me, maybe it will feel better." He knew that I was soft-hearted, so he always used this trick to coax me to sleep with him. Now he is going even further. I had something hidden in my heart, so I told him what my mother had mentioned and said worriedly, if my mother's dream is true, then in 3 years, my whole family will be in trouble, and I will have to enter the palace to be your stepmother. That's wishful thinking. Zhou Songshi first bit my cheek, then said, I know what Madame Wen's dream is about. 10 days later, when everything is settled, I will tell you in detail. 10 days later. I just remembered that he and Xie Qingyang would get married in 10 days. 08. Huayang is the only legitimate daughter of the current emperor, and her wedding was extremely luxurious and grand. Zhou Songshi held my hand and whispered, Huayang was very healthy when she was young, and she often played in the capital with Xie Qingyang. Later, her mother committed suicide, and the queen found an excuse to take Huayang to her side. Since then, her health has been getting worse day by day. 10 years ago, I was framed by the queen, and my life was hanging by a thread. Huayang told me in tears that she didn't have long to live anyway, and that if she could save my life, she would be able to give an explanation to her mother in her afterlife. There was deep pain in his tone, but his face was calm. I was filled with grief and speechless, and could only accompany him quietly. Zhou Songshi let out a long sigh, stared into my eyes and said, Ayuan, after today, everything will be settled. I want you to stay by my side and watch this land change hands. Okay. I hugged him tightly. Zhou Songshi, you can do it. There was already a lot of bustle outside as servants moved around. Today, countless people came from outside to attend the wedding. Today, the emperor and the empress will preside over the wedding ceremony for Huayang in Mingda Hall. Zhou Songshi put on the phoenix crown and bridal robe that belonged to Huayang and put on makeup. He stretched out his sleeves and stood in the light, looking so handsome and extraordinary that no one dared to desecrate him. If Huayang were alive, she would also be so stunning and marry Xie Qingyang with all the wishes. I disguised myself as a young eunuch and served Zhou Songshi. When Xie Qingyang came to pick someone up, a dazed look flashed across his eyes. At this moment, he might have thought of Huayang. I remember chatting with Xie Qingyang in the past. He often talked to me about Huayang before he was 12 years old. His tone was filled with sighs and nostalgia that I did not understand at that time. She loves to laugh and is very happy. There was a period of time when she was in poor health and was confined to the palace and couldn't go out. I bought some sugar rattles for her to play with, and she was very happy. Huayang is very patient. She loves painting and sometimes spends an hour on a single painting. When the late queen was alive, she wanted to give us. I used to be confused because the Huayang that Xie Qingyang mentioned was not the same as the Huayang I knew. The Huayang I know is often unhappy and has little patience. I even went to Zhou Songshi and asked him, You were so gentle and lovely when you were a child. How come you became like this when you grew up? He just leaned against the railing and fed the fish. His expression was blank for a moment, and he said in an ambiguous tone, Huayang in Xie Qingyang's memory is like that. I wanted to ask him more, but he started to scold me with a fierce face, saying that I only knew how to go out and play and didn't know how to eat with him. I felt guilty, so he changed the subject. Now that I think about it, Huayang, which belonged to Xie Qingyang, has long since passed away. 09. In Mingda Hall, everything happened very suddenly. An arrow came out of nowhere and shot the prince to death. The scene became chaotic for a while. Xie Qingyang shouted, There are assassins protecting you. Countless silver-armored guards poured in from all directions, surrounding the entire Mingda Hall like an iron wall. General Li Zhongquan was trapped by the guards. He shouted angrily, How dare you touch me? Zhou Songshi took off her wedding dress, revealing a dark suit, and drew a sword, holding it to Li Zhongquan's neck. He said coldly, The one who assassinated the prince was someone close to the general. It is reasonable for the general to surrender and wait for the truth to be found out. The prince lay on the ground, vomiting blood. The queen let out a shrill scream and almost fainted. The emperor went to help the queen, but suddenly a dagger stabbed him. The emperor roared in pain. The queen wants to kill me. The eunuch beside the emperor held the queen in fear and shouted in horror, "Hurry up and save the queen. She is planning a rebellion and assassinating the emperor." Mingda Hall was in chaos. The prince was assassinated and was dying. The queen actually hid a dagger and assassinated the emperor. Princess Huayang acted promptly, captured General Li Zhongquan, who was attempting to escape, and mobilized the imperial guards to garrison the palace. Is the dust settled? No, not yet. Inside the bedroom, the emperor who had been assassinated a quarter of an hour ago sat on the couch with a calm expression. He threw the blood bag in his arms to the eunuch, seeming a little tired. The queen fell to the ground and suddenly understood everything. Zhou Songshi changed his clothes into a gorgeous brocade robe and a jade crown on his head, looking extremely graceful and elegant. He stood in the bedroom, looking at the embarrassed queen, and said indifferently, "When I was 5 years old, I played hide-and-seek with Huayang and hid in the closet, watching you force my mother to death. When I was 12 years old, you falsely accused me of committing adultery and forced my father to execute me. This account can finally be settled." "Bitch, bitch," the queen cursed angrily. "It turns out that the person who died in the fire 10 years ago was not you. For 10 years, I have disguised myself as Huayang and recognized the enemy as my mother to please you." Zhou Songshi closed his eyes and said slowly, "Queen, the prince's life is hanging by a thread. The general refuses to admit that he assassinated the prince and intended to rebel. Whether the prince can survive depends on your confession."
"Yonar, ma yon."
The queen was at a loss for a moment. Suddenly, she looked at the emperor and said with tears streaming down her face, "Your Majesty, if it weren't for my father, would you have been able to sit on the throne? We have been married for more than 10 years, and you really don't care at all. Do you want to watch Yuan die? He is also your son." The emperor's calm expression finally broke. He grabbed the queen's neck and said miserably, "Who wants to be the emperor? Who wants me and Wanwan to be ruined in this palace? You forced her to death and killed Huayang, but I still have to pretend to be in love with you. For more than 10 years, I have been looking forward to grinding you into ashes every day. In the small window, you painted your eyebrows in front of the mirror. In the snowy night, you searched for fragrance and gave me plum blossoms. In the tower, you held me and promised to spend your life with me." The queen seemed to have lost her soul and laughed crazily. "It's all fake. You deceived me so badly, Zhou Lang. Do you know how long I have loved you? Back then, Xia Wan and I were like sisters, but she was always the only one in your eyes. After you got married, I always hoped that you would take a concubine. But you didn't, and there was only a constant stream of good stories coming out of the palace. You built a swing for Xia Wan, you made calming lanterns for her, and you gave birth to a pair of children. You don't know how much my heart aches when I hear all this, and how much I envy her. Back then, the previous emperor was sick and weak, and the court wanted to choose a new emperor. My father asked me who I wanted to marry. Whoever I chose would be the new emperor. I chose you, and I was so happy that I couldn't sleep all night, looking forward to marrying you. Leaving you, I have never liked you, not even a little bit." The emperor gently stroked a jade pendant on his waist and said with a nostalgic tone, "I have been enduring for many years, and I have been looking forward to Songshi growing up, accumulating strength, and personally ending your Li family's revenge for Huayang and Wanwan. I am an incompetent and cowardly person. I can't sit on the throne of the emperor, and I don't want to sit on it. Yes, you have always treated my gift as a waste." The queen said sadly, "But when you first ascended the throne, Xiaowan advised you that since the matter was done, you should shoulder the responsibility of the country. You are such a lazy person, but you are willing to listen to her, diligently handle state affairs every day, and humbly learn to be a good emperor, just to make Xiaowan feel at ease." The queen wiped her tears, stood up, and straightened her appearance. 17 years of love. In the end, it was all in vain. An hour later, the emperor appeared in the Qingjing Hall. 17 years of love and hatred have finally come to an end. The queen took poison out of fear of punishment, the prince died of his injuries, and Li Zhongquan hanged himself in prison. The Li family, which occupied half of the empire, was wiped out in an instant. Zhou Songshi appeared in the court wearing the crown prince's robes and exposed the queen's crimes to the world. He can finally appear in the sun openly. All the ministers prostrated themselves on the ground, shouting, "Long live His Royal Highness the Crown Prince." I dressed up as a little eunuch and sat aside, and Zhou Songshi held my hand tightly. 12 years have passed, and the lonely, proud, and brilliant prince is back.
10.
In the 3rd year after I regained my identity, a Yuan became my crown princess. A Yuan's parents and brother all returned to the capital. She sat on my lap and said in confusion, "My mother said she had a dream in which our whole family would encounter disasters and I would enter the palace to become a concubine." I was scared for a while. Now it seems that it has not come true. Didn't my mother-in-law say later that it was just that the nightmare demon took it seriously? I teased her. "Could it be that you really want to be my stepmother?" A Yuan bit me angrily, and I teased her to change the subject and not mention that matter again. My mother-in-law's dream was something from her past life, and I have the memories of my past life. In the previous life, a Yuan's family suffered a tragic disaster because they were involved in corruption. Only a Yuan escaped and entered the palace to become a maid. That night, my mother-in-law took her family out of Beijing and handed me a letter. The letter contained only a few words. "Your Highness, in the previous life, our family suffered a tragic disaster. A Yuan was confined to the palace to be a maid. She has been with you for more than 10 years. In this life, please treat her well." It turned out that my mother-in-law also had memories of her past life, and she knew that I was not Huayang, but Zhou Songshi. My mother-in-law took a huge risk to test me, just to earn more favor for Yuan. The imperial family is the most ruthless. She is afraid that I will ascend to the throne in the future and forget our friendship over the years and let a Yuan down. Since I married Yuan, I rarely think about my past life. In the cold winter, the bedroom was very warm because of the floor heating. A Yuan wore a furry vest and had her hair tied up in a simple bun. She sat on the couch and flipped through a picture album. When I got closer, she looked up at me. The emerald earrings hanging on her white ears swayed, and my heart swayed with them. She could never hide things in her heart, and her eyes were filled with broken tears. Today I learned an old story. When I was 8 years old, the Imperial Observatory received your secret order to come to the countryside to look for me. From the beginning to the end, there was no such thing as exorcising evil spirits or curing diseases for you. It was all a cover-up. Zhou Songshi, why have you loved me for so many years? A Yuan is free and easy, but also stubborn. She looked at me with tearful eyes, and my heart began to feel wet. I said half-truthfully, "I did get seriously ill the year I replaced Huayang. I vaguely saw a little girl in my dream who would accompany me for the rest of my life. After I woke up, I asked the people from the Imperial Observatory to look for her. I didn't expect that there really was someone like you waiting for me in the distant Fengrao County." "Really?" Yuan looked at me doubtfully. "Then you can predict the future so magically?" I pinched her soft cheeks, bent down and kissed her, pretending to be pitiful, and said, "Maybe my mother and Huayang are still alive in heaven, and seeing how miserable and depressed I am, they sent me a dream and told me to go find you in advance." When I mentioned the past, Yuan softened her heart and stopped asking questions. Instead, she hugged me and said, Okay, it's all in the past. I heard the plum blossoms in the garden are blooming. Let's go take a look." "Aren't you planning to go out of the palace to play?" I looked at her. Even after becoming the crown princess, she was still restless and went out of the palace to play every few days. Sometimes she was so engrossed in playing that she didn't want to come back, and I had to send someone to bring her back by force. A Yuan's eyes flickered, and she held my arm, sighing in a fake manner. "Alas, I haven't left the palace for 3 days. Let's go quickly. It's too late, and the plum blossoms will be gone." Listen, these are just perfunctory excuses. The palace maid serving on the side couldn't help but laugh secretly. I followed her lazily, looking at her happy appearance, and said softly in my heart, A yuan, in this life, I only wish you peace, happiness, and freedom from worries. I hope I am the only one who remembers the pain and suffering of my past life. 11. In my previous life, I met a yuan in a bitterly cold winter. That winter, the queen accused me of defiling the palace and put me under house arrest. Huayong dragged his sick body to plead for me and died of illness the next day. I was sitting in the East Palace when Xie Qingyang brought me the news of Huayong's death. He was in a trance. Your Highness, Huayong is gone. She is gone just like that. Xie Qingyang seemed to be in disbelief and kept muttering to himself. My mother, Queen Huayong, was forced to death by Li Fengyu. Sooner or later, I will die. In order to protect me, my father pretended to be furious, beat me with 20 boards, and imprisoned me in the cold palace. The queen sent someone to attack me secretly, and they beat me until my legs were covered in blood. She wanted to take the opportunity to destroy me. For 3 days, I endured hunger, cold, and pain in the cold palace. That's when Yuan appeared. She wore a pink palace dress, tied her hair into 2 buns, and performed a messy ceremony. It was obvious that she was a young palace maid who had not received proper training. I guess she was either the descendant of a criminal or the daughter of a commoner, and could only be thrown into the cold palace to serve me. Your Highness, are you dead? She actually had the courage to come over and push me. For a moment, I wanted to laugh. This little palace maid was so stupid. She was violating a huge taboo by talking to me like that. A yuan found a lot of herbs in the palace and prepared a folk remedy to treat my injuries. My legs gradually got better. When I pretended to be asleep, I often heard her crying quietly and talking to herself at night. Mom and Dad, I will take good care of myself. Yuan is now quite successful. She is now serving His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. When Yuan becomes successful, I will definitely clear my father's name. Later I learned that a yuan's father was a minor county magistrate who was involved in a corruption case, and his entire family was imprisoned. A yuan was young and escaped the disaster. Unfortunately, a yuan did not live to see her grow up, and the 4 members of the Wen family died or became disabled. I didn't dare tell her about this. A yuan is a smart and tenacious girl. She grew up tenaciously and lives every day with optimism. She also asked me to make progress even in this cold palace. Your Highness, it's time to study. Your Highness, it's time to get up and go for a run. Your Highness, you have to eat even if you don't like it. Only when you are full will you have strength. A yuan is like a little bee, circling around me. In spring, she would pick some wildflowers and put them in a shabby vase to add some interest. When it was warm, she wrote with me in the yard. It can be seen that a yuan's parents taught her carefully. She has good handwriting, a cheerful personality, and a healthy body. She was the only one in the palace who could steal carp from the pond in the imperial garden, pick locust flowers in the old Empress Dowager's palace, hunt pheasants, and pick chestnuts in the back hills. My mother never restricted me from embroidering or reading at home. I often played outside. A yuan grinded for me and said proudly, I have a good memory. The folk recipe for curing your highness's leg was taught to me by a hunter in the mountains. His family has used that recipe for generations, so I wrote it down. I didn't expect to use it again. As for her, it's almost 12 o'clock after the Chinese New Year, but she is still in a timid mood. The young palace maids around her, at her age, had already saved up their dowries and looked for a good man. A yuan is so good. Today she goes to the imperial kitchen to get a chicken leg. Tomorrow she goes to the eunuchs to gamble for money, and the day after tomorrow she gets some random stuff from somewhere. In short, a yuan is busy all year round. A yuan has never been good at serving others. Although she was only the daughter of an 8th-rank county magistrate, she was also served by 1 or 2 capable maids. She was sent to the palace because her family fell into trouble. The palace maids did not educate her well and sent her to the cold palace at will. Asked her to boil a pot of water, and she got a big blister on her hand. She looked so pitiful, and I had to feed her. I asked her to pour the water for washing feet, and she soaked in the hot water herself, and asked me to add more hot water. I asked her to sew a piece of clothing, but the stitches were so messy that I had to take it apart and sew it again. In the end, I was the one who boiled water in the cold palace, sewed clothes, and repaired furniture. A Yuan was like a little fool. She just ran in excitedly and said to me, "Your Highness, I have accepted Uncle Wang from the imperial kitchen as my godfather. We won't be hungry anymore." I heard from her that Uncle Wang, who worked in the imperial kitchen, was actually from the same hometown as her. After chatting for a while, it turned out that a Yuan had also helped Uncle Wang's elderly mother at home, and they had formed a good relationship.
12.
Another year passed. A Yuan was 13 years old, started her menstruation, and became a big girl. She caught a cold and curled up in her bed, crying and saying she was going to die. I touched her head and could only explain to her that this was a sign of growing up. She was horrified and said, "Oh, I can't get close to men from now on. I heard that after my period, I can get pregnant." I was speechless for a moment and didn't know how to talk to her about things between men and women. The most important thing right now is to sew a menstrual belt for her. A Yuan's needlework skills are not good enough to watch, so only I can do this kind of thing. I cut out the softest undershirt I could find and sewed it for her with fine stitches. I should be at an age where I should be shy, but a Yuan praised me for my needlework skills without a care. Yes, she entered the palace at the age of 8, and no one taught her the etiquette, morality, integrity, and shame of a girl. I sighed and just thought that there was a long time to go, and I could teach her slowly. We lived together in the cold palace for several years, sharing an apple and a steamed bun. Humph, if she got a chicken leg, she would secretly take a bite and bring it back, lying to me that the cat ate it. On the days without charcoal fire, her cold little feet were in my arms. I teased her. "Yuan, you ignore the difference between men and women and stay in my bed to keep warm all day long. How are you going to get married in the future?" A Yuan would just roll her eyes at me, count the coins she won from gambling, and say nonchalantly, "I'm about to freeze to death. Why would I care about getting married? Besides, if His Highness becomes famous in the future, I won't be the loser. There are so many good men in the capital, I can choose whatever I want. I met the son of the Taifu family a few days ago. He is good-looking and has a nice smile. Oh, it would be nice if I could marry such a man in the future." The Grand Tutor has only one son, Xie Qingyang. A Yuan actually likes a gentleman like Xie Qingyang. She really has no vision. Outside, the queen was pregnant again, but this time she miscarried at only 3 months old. She was busy fighting with the new favorite concubine and educating her own son, and she rarely paid attention to me, the deposed prince imprisoned in the cold palace. The second prince born to the queen was named Crown Prince when I was a young 20-year-old. The civil officials in the court wrote a letter to the emperor asking him to release me from the cold palace. I pretended to be crazy and stupid, and people around me said that I had become stupid after being imprisoned for all these years. The queen finally let down her guard and released me. A Yuan and I moved to the spacious and bright Wudong garden, and a Yuan ran around happily in the yard. That year, she was 16 years old. A Yuan is not a stunning beauty, but she has her own unique charm. She was like a flower blooming in the field, with a vigorous vitality that was rare in this chilly, cold palace. It was at that time that my father came, and he made a Yuan his concubine. I knelt on the ground and begged him for the first time. "Songshi, Huayang, and your mother died with their eyes wide open. How dare you have a private relationship with your children before you avenge your great vengeance?" My father said to me, "Look at the look in that little girl's eyes. She can't hide it anymore. Put her by my side, and I will take good care of her for you. Otherwise, the queen will find your weakness and force her to death in the future. My love will kill Yuan." It was just like the emperor's love killed the queen mother. A Yuan didn't know anything about love affairs between men and women. She was just worried and sighed all the time. I asked her what was wrong, and she hesitated for a long time before whispering in my ear, "I heard that if you become the emperor's concubine, you have to kiss him and sleep in the same bed with him." Hey, I don't want to. The sweet and soft scent from her body came over me, and I couldn't concentrate. A Yuan pulled my sleeve again and said, How about I kiss you first and see how it feels? My Adam's apple rolled, and I nodded. After a long while, Yuan covered her chest and said, Uh, I feel my heart is beating too fast. I'd better not kiss you. I want to live a few more years. I really couldn't help it and gave her a slap on the head. A Yuan got angry now and grabbed me and hit my chest. Oh, what a fool she is. She doesn't get angry when you kiss her, but gets more excited when you beat her. A Yuan became my father's concubine, and suddenly one day she became enlightened. We were kissing in the closet, and she pinched the soft flesh on my waist and said, "Zhou Songshi, you are such a big liar. How dare you tell me that? You will get used to this kind of thing if you practice it often." I calmly grabbed her hand and looked at her rosy cheeks in the dim light. She bit her smooth lips and said after a while, "The nanny said that I can't have physical contact with men casually. This kind of thing can only be done between husband and wife. I am now your father's concubine. It is treason for the two of us to do this." She struggled with herself again. "Your father is very good to me, just like my own father. Alas, Zhou Songshi, I feel so sorry for him. I really want to take her little head apart and see what's inside." I patiently told her many things. For example, the deep blood feud between the queen and I, the fact that I have been forbearing for many years to accumulate strength, and the fact that my father chose her to be a concubine just to protect her. A Yuan was smart after all, and figured it out quickly. She said thoughtfully, Then after you get your revenge, can you promise me to Xie Qingyang?" I kissed her angrily and questioned her. "You've done this to me. Why are you still thinking about marrying Xie Qingyang? Could it be that you're just teasing me, Yuan? Do you know that you can only do this kind of thing with one person?" "Really?" A Yuan said in surprise. "Why did I see A Chui kissing Xiao Wu and Hu Zi?" A Chui was a palace maid who served her. Xiao Wu and Hu Zi, one is a young eunuch and the other is a young guard. What kind of messed up people are around her? I was silent for a moment, secretly resentful that I didn't force her to read more when she was in the cold palace. She is not at all worthy of the 4 words well-educated and well-mannered. Later, my father sent 2 female teachers to teach A Yuan how to read and behave, and we didn't see each other for 3 months. The next time we met was in the imperial garden, where flowers were in full bloom. She was wearing a pink palace dress, looking pure and innocent, and the red hairpin on her head was a butterfly with flapping wings. As she came closer, she looked at me, and her face suddenly turned red. At that moment, I knew that Yuan had grown up. He is no longer like he used to be when he would just wink at me when we met and then ask me to go to the library and gossip with me about this concubine or that palace maid. Everything ended when I was 22 years old. The Leaf family finally fell, and the queen laughed loudly. "Zhou Songshi, you are indeed a natural emperor. You have been acting crazy and stupid in front of me for so many years, and even kneeled in front of me and called me mother. You have endured humiliation and endured hardships, and now you finally get what you want. Isn't it great?" She committed suicide by taking poison. Before she died, she looked strange and told me that she had left me a great gift. It wasn't until Madoka died in my arms that I realized what she was talking about. A Yuan was actually poisoned. She lay in my arms, spitting blood, like a rapidly fading flower. Alas, Zhou Songshi, I died just like that.
A Yuan was still laughing.
She stroked my lips and comforted me. "When I saw you in the cold palace, I was thinking, alas, such a handsome prince, he must be dead. The blood in my body has stopped flowing, my hands are shaking, I want to say something but my brain is blank and my tongue is numb." Tears flowed from the corners of Ayuan's eyes, and she said softly, "Zhou Songshi, I am going to die. You just think about me for 10 years. After that, forget about me and smile more." A Yuan is gone just like that. Since she left, I have been living in a daze, not knowing the passage of time. 3 years later, my father abdicated and I ascended the throne. I chose a child from the royal family and made him the crown prince. 7 years later, Xie Qingyang and I sat together drinking. Xie Qingyang said to me, "I always dream about Huayang. When can I forget him?" "Yes, when can I forget?" When I eat, I will think of a Yuan, with her greasy mouth gnawing on a chicken leg. When I walk, I think of a Yuan, jumping around and chasing butterflies. When I go to sleep, I will think of a Yuan, with her cold feet stuffed into my arms. Spring, summer, autumn, and winter, 3 meals a day, and every moment, I think of her. Before a Yuan died, she asked me to remember her for 10 years. Now is the perfect time. I found the spiritual witch clan living in seclusion in the mountains and offered the rest of my life and the luck of the emperor in exchange for a new life. After 49 days of burning heartache, my blood is almost drained, but I need to maintain the last bit of sanity to enter reincarnation. That moment seemed very long, yet very short. I really lived my life again. When I woke up again, I was 12 years old, on the eve of the queen slandering me for defiling the palace. Unfortunately, Huayang is already too sick and weak, and I can't save her. Song, sure, I'll go for you. Huayang held my hand and said softly, "You must stay strong and live on, Mother, and I will be watching over you from heaven." Huayang jumped into the sea of fire instead of me. The queen thought I was dead, and she let down her guard from then on. I fell seriously ill and brought a Yuan back from the remote countryside in the name of the Imperial Observatory. I also asked Xie Qingyang to transfer Lord Wen to the capital to prevent him from being implicated in the corruption case. At that time, I was lying on the couch and watching a Yuan walk into the bedroom. She was still wearing the pink dress, with 2 buns on her hair. She had bright eyes and looked at me with curiosity. "Princess, I am the lucky doll that will ward off evil spirits and cure your illness. With me here, your illness will definitely get better. Your Highness, you are so beautiful." She held my hand with her little hand and didn't seem to be shy. I looked at her and shed tears. She hurriedly wiped my tears. "Your Highness, why are you crying? Where does it hurt? Let me rub it for you. A Yuan, my Yuan. In this life, I will give my all to ensure that you have a worry-free life."
End.